Let's begin the broadcast with some breaking inputs coming in, which in fact is the joke of the century, because we're given to understand that Shehbaz Sharif and Asim Munir are eyeing the Peace Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize, pitched by Pakistan to give Nobel to Shehbaz Sharif and Asim Munir. There's a demand, a pitch that their Prime Minister and their Field Marshal should be honored with the Nobel Peace Prize. Let's go across to Mayank, who's joining us in the broadcast with more details. Well, Mayank, the fact that peace talks will be held in Islamabad in itself, attracted a lot of strong reactions, highlighting and pointing out how this is happening in a country that sheltered Osama bin Laden till, of course, America carried out an operation and eliminated him. And now there's another joke on the world. Peace Prize demand for Shehbaz Sharif and Asim Munir.
Indeed amusing. The way one tweet or the way the contents brought out by Shehbaz Sharif have put the world in a difficult situation, and even further is going to put the things reeling down badly. And people there are supposed to forward his name to an expert committee or experts and the committee of the Nobel Prize for a person like Shehbaz Sharif. And you can see things on which the people are supposed to forward his name, which is ceasefire. It is in quandary. It is not yet clear that what side the things would rest. And in this case, every side has a different thing to or take on the very ceasefire. And this exactly happens when a country like Pakistan, which simply acted like a postman and did not have any influence to bring the warring sides, which in this case was US and Iran, to a middle ground. These things are supposed to happen, or about to, definitely they come out like this only. And we see the things are reeling badly to a state wherein it can become further precarious. And things were already bad, but there was a sigh of relief as the word ceasefire was being used, and people had started seeing that positively. But what you see in terms of operations, as far as Israel is concerned, they have continued with the operations on Lebanon. As far as US is concerned, they are ready to launch even bigger military operation. And on Iran's side, they say the Strait of Hormuz remains closed effectively and practically. So what you see, is this what the state which will be winning Nobel Prize for Shehbaz Sharif? It is definitely a big joke.
Well, Pakistan's industry body, the Karachi Chamber of Commerce, some businessmen, some people from the Pakistani media have made this pitch. We have Srinjoy joining us in the broadcast as well. I'm not sure about the Nobel Peace Prize, but something certainly should be given to Pakistan for creating the confusion in the first place when it comes to a ceasefire.
Well, first of all, no one has nominated Shehbaz Sharif for a Nobel Prize. I mean, here are people merely talking about it. And that's even worse, because at this point, to even imagine a Nobel Prize for either Shehbaz Sharif or Asim Munir is absolutely bizarre. There's no other word to describe that, because they have done absolutely nothing so far. And on them lies the problems that resulted in Operation Sindoor. In fact, they are more than anyone responsible for the problems that happened, the massacre at Pahalgam. Here is a man who's responsible for Pahalgam, and you imagine that he gets a Nobel Prize. That is the saddest part.
Absolutely. Now, like you said, this pitch has been made for allegedly facilitating a ceasefire, for playing some sort of a role when it comes to the ceasefire that we're looking at, which already seems to be collapsing. So let's take a look at what all Pakistan has done and what has been its great contribution. Here on the screen, this is what Pakistan said and did, after which we saw how confusion prevailed. So this is what Shehbaz Sharif, the Pakistani Prime Minister, said: ceasefire everywhere. First, he put out a draft post and then, of course, edited that after the entire world noticed how perhaps it was handed over to the Pakistani Prime Minister. And then in over-enthusiasm, perhaps, or in a bid to project itself as the master mediator, he says ceasefire, which will be applicable everywhere. Comes in a counter, of course, a couple of hours later. United States says, the Vice President says, we never made that promise. And he is talking here about including Lebanon, because when the Pakistani Prime Minister said applicable everywhere, he meant Lebanon, that the ceasefire includes Lebanon as well, which of course Iran backs because it suits them. But J.D. Vance says we never made that promise. Lebanon was not included. It was not part of the ceasefire arrangement. Ceasefire effective immediately. Another announcement that came in that same post by the Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. J.D. Vance says this is all a misunderstanding. But what did the misunderstanding cost? A series of strikes on Lebanon, 250 people dead. Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said Islamabad talks for lasting peace. Deal limited to Iran front. Of course, J.D. Vance kept talking about the ceasefire arrangement. When asked about whether Lebanon is included or not, he said, first, we never made such a promise. Lebanon has not been included. And this deal is limited only to the Iran front. Now, as far as that Islamabad talks for lasting peace announcement is concerned, remember that Iran initially through a post confirmed that yes, an Iranian delegation will travel all the way to Islamabad for the so-called peace talks. But now that post stands deleted. So what really is this whole Nobel Peace Prize demand pitch for? For creating confusion? For making announcements that clearly have not lasted even for 24 hours? Let's go back to my colleagues Mayank and Srinjoy, both on the broadcast with us. Srinjoy, like I said, something for sure should be given to Pakistan for leading everyone to this situation, applicable to all. The ceasefire applicable to all and everywhere. That's the announcement made by Pakistani Prime Minister. US says we have never promised anything like that. It's a misunderstanding. So something for sure for creating that misunderstanding.
First of all, the Nobel Prize is awarded for peace, not for confusion. And all the Pakistanis have done is create confusion. Now, there have been many people, very undeserving, who have even gone near the Nobel Prize. But these people have not even been nominated. Here are some random people in Pakistan who are saying X and Y should get a Nobel Prize in peace. Now, this will actually shock people in Norway who award the Nobel Prize in peace. And certainly, regardless of all the people who have got the Nobel Prize, and maybe they should not, these people, these two are some of the worst names that you can think of. And the only positive here is that these names are being floated by not people of any value, but these are just random people in Pakistan who are coming up with such names. And these people who have suggested these names don't matter, not matter in the least. And naturally, these statements by them will not be taken into account by anybody. Several hundred people or more are nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize every year. And a maximum of 3 can win any Nobel Peace Prize. Certainly, these two have no chance of going anywhere near a Nobel Prize in Oslo later in the year.
Absolutely. Mayank, I want you to come in as well. But before that, let's listen into what J.D. Vance said when asked about including Lebanon in the arrangement. And he points out how this is all a misunderstanding and that America never promised such a thing.
First of all, I actually think, and there's a lot of bad faith negotiation and a lot of bad faith, propaganda going on. I think this comes from a legitimate misunderstanding. I think the Iranians thought that the ceasefire included Lebanon, and it just didn't. We never made that promise. We never indicated that was going to be the case. What we said is that the ceasefire would be focused on Iran, and the ceasefire would be focused on America's allies, both Israel and the Gulf Arab states. And look, if Iran wants to let this negotiation fall apart in a conflict where they were getting hammered over Lebanon, which has nothing to do with them and which the United States never once said was part of the ceasefire, that's ultimately their choice. We think that would be dumb, but that's their choice.
So while we're talking about the fragile truce and ceasefire, the question, of course, is it on the brink of collapse? Now, Benjamin Netanyahu